Hello. Like a crime drama, my story always seems to begin with the most essential of plot components, the reality of a dead man. And that dead man, of course, is the mysterious George. Yes, folks, this is a murder mystery without a murder. And in exploring the requisite clues and evidence, there are no bullets stuck in the wall, no knife thrown into the creek, no poison hidden behind the paint cans in the garage. I've investigated a number of the actual tangible objects in the house, trying to determine why George was so focused on blurring the lines between life and death, why he was so obsessed with UFOs, and why in his world the supernatural seemed to be quite natural. Clearly, he was attempting to stretch the complex boundaries of both a spiritual and an intellectual life. And these boundaries were being stretched and repurposed like taffy. His curiosity, in my opinion, was compelled and exaggerated by his need to face his own impending death. And while I've sifted through many of the tangible objects discovered in the house, we're about to delve into the intangibles. And to be clear, George died of natural causes. Could this be a paranormal fairy tale? I say that playfully, but it fits. There's a magical beast in the form of a messenger falcon. There are treasures and riddles. There is loss and loneliness and guidance. And there are signs pointing in every direction, including back towards myself. This is a fable, a myth, a legend, except it's real. You know, often there's a false lead or an obstacle in a procedural crime drama, the red herring that leads you astray. I want to tell you something almost funny. I've been attempting to steer clear of the haunted house and creepy ghost story genres of storytelling. They often feel like a combination of cliche and total shenanigans. And they can feel ungrounded in reality or integrity. I wanted to focus more on the legacy of a life lived and how its unusual residue can influence those who come after that life is over. And in trying to steer clear of those genres, in a way, I haven't been entirely honest because I haven't really gone into the number of paranormal experiences that mainly my guests have had in this house, and some of the strange things that have been occurring to me, especially recently. You might remember that in episode 4, I filmed outdoors at somebody else's suggestion because I'd been having a number of technical difficulties in filming, including corrupted video and sound. So that's one example. Another but small relevant example is that recently I had a few guests in my house and they were sitting at my counter in my kitchen while I was preparing food, and they asked me a question. In response, I mentioned that I had been ghosted by someone, and as soon as I said that first syllable of the word ghosted, a red onion that had been sitting inside a basket on the counter decided to jump out and land on the floor and roll in my direction. Nobody had stamped their foot on the ground or bumped the counter. It was just completely out of the blue. And I know it's a weird example, but I'm just going to mention it anyways. In the last week, there have been 2 snakes found outside the house and 1 inside. The first was a 4-foot-long rattlesnake that my son discovered on Mother's Day lounging in the carport. The second was an almost embryonic-looking 8-inch snake that I discovered in my living room. It wasn't a rattlesnake. It was a very weird, like beige-colored snake with a black head. I don't know if you've ever felt it before, but for many people, when you see a snake, your whole body responds to it in the most visceral of ways. It's like drinking several adrenaline cocktails all at once. And the third snake this week, I very nearly walked into. I was walking towards the greenhouse with a wheelbarrow. I was scanning the ground very carefully, as I always do. And since my son had seen that large rattlesnake, I was super careful. And as I reached the greenhouse door, I felt like I didn't need to look down anymore because I'd arrived at my destination. So I raised my head and grabbed for the door latch. And in my peripheral vision, I saw a snake uncoil, and I heard that sound, that sound that I really hate. And I could see the outline of a giant snake uncoiling to my right. And I could see that snake was probably about five feet long. I stopped, moved back slowly, screamed, and ran, which you're not really supposed to do. I mean, I moved back slowly to start. Anyway, it is spring, and I do live in rattlesnake country, but 3 snakes in 5 days is quite a bit. And, it's definitely not necessarily a sign of spirit activity. But even so, I was completely unnerved and unsettled. I had a really hard time focusing on getting anything done. And sometimes when I'm struggling to get work done and I feel distracted, usually if I'm writing and I have like a writer's block, I employ any number of tricks. And one is to pull cards, whether they're tarot cards, which I started pulling and reading after I found a book on George's shelf about how to learn how to read tarot cards. I also sometimes pull a card from one of George's animal oracle decks. So for fun, I grabbed one of the oracle decks and I shuffled it for a few minutes, and I pulled out just one card, and you won't believe what that card was, but it was a snake card. I was like, what the hell is going on? That felt almost as shocking as the snake experiences themselves. So I just took it in for whatever it was. And in reading what it said about snakes, the indicator on the card said it was a symbol of change and healing. It indicated to me that I'm a healer and that I needed to clear my heart and hands. I don't know how I feel about that indicator. I'm just going to leave that as information in the air. That's not really landing for me, but you never know. So the composer Chopin saw ghosts repeatedly in a monastery on the island of Majorca. John Lennon claimed to see not only ghosts, but UFOs as well. And many people who visit well-known war sites where there was great death and tragedy, if you think Gettysburg and Omaha Beach in Normandy, sense or report seeing ghosts. And maybe the most unsettling thing about ghosts or spirit activity is that they're intangible. We don't know where to place them in those distinct boxes that categorize all the thoughts in our minds. Of course, I fear being honest about these experiences because I feel that people will judge me, and I might judge me if I didn't know me. But sometimes in life, you have to stretch the boundaries of what is normal and accepted and let them expand to their natural state, even if that state is a state of nonconformity. And that's the lead-in for my introducing a video of an interview with a friend of mine. His name is Ray, and he talks about an experience he had in the house. And he was so generous with his time and with his integrity of putting himself out there to tell a story that might not fit other people's perceptions of what is normal. So here we go.
I'm a therapist. I'm a social scientist, a social worker. We talk about, we explore, taken for granted experiences. We explore, oppressed status. We deal in psychology. We deal in, person and environment as they're influenced by the world, both negatively and positively. And
Mhm.
so I tend to look at things more from an empirical standpoint, right? It's like what I can see, what I can test, what I can measure. But
Right.
sometimes in life, these things occur in our lives that we can't explain them, right? We can't explain them in that context. So
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's helpful.
I was going to ask you about your background, and you just did it for me.
Sure.
And actually, um, um, so what I was starting to say was that I'm really not attempting, this is not a paranormal podcast. I might
Yeah.
use that as a keyword in an Instagram post, but this is not that. And so it's really an exploration into someone's legacy, and it's sort of this residue that seems to be here that I'm exploring, which is very, very interesting, to say the least. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, right. And so we know each other for years, for decades, actually. And Ray's been a regular guest at my house. And
Beautiful home.
thank you. Thank you. Perhaps you could start at the very beginning of the story about your experience that we had here. I know we were gathered with a number of people in the house,
Yes.
and
We were gathered in the area. You'll forgive me. I don't know how you identify each room. We were near the fireplace, as I recall.
the
We were
the
sitting
big
together.
fireplace, because
Yeah, the
there's
big fire.
two. Yeah.
That's right, there too. And there were several of us sitting around, and we were just chatting. And I don't even remember what time of day or night it was. But I remember sitting with other people around me,
Mhm.
to my right and left on a sofa. And I don't even recall what we were discussing, but I suddenly felt it felt like a hand on the back of my head. And it was just held there for probably 10, 15 seconds. And what I remember more specifically is the feeling that I got, which was, I think with a lot of these things, it's really hard to even put to words sometimes what we experience. But I think I attempted to do this in an email with you, to say what I felt was just the sense that I was a trustworthy narrator, that I was someone who would
Mm.
identify what I was experiencing as something worth noting and worth saying out loud. And that um, I was trusted, that I would share the experience of it, and not just brush it off, or treat it as something that was, or that I would not say anything at all, actually,
Right.
that I would just be quiet about it. Um, and so I think literally at that moment, I think I said something out loud. And I remember feeling, Micah, like a little embarrassed to say it
Mhm.
out loud. Like, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to say this because I had already sensed something in the house. And so that's when I said, I just experienced this thing. I think that's how it went.
Wow, that's interesting. Thank you for narrating that. I so
Yeah.
appreciate it, because I also feel like embarrassed in a way telling this story because I feel like it's a leap of faith for people to hear you without judgment, you know? And so I so appreciate that. And when you experienced that, did you feel that it was male or female, or did you, is that not of concern in that instance?
Um, I don't know if it's just from the mental filter that I was holding about knowing the experience in the house or knowing who lived in the house.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if it was just my um, bias in
Right.
assuming it was male. Um, but I can honestly tell you, yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not really
Uh-huh.
sure if it was male or female. I remember thinking it was probably male, just based on what I knew.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And in some ways, we talked about some of my previous experiences in the house, but I don't think we were, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think I was like really playing that up or asking people if they were having experiences or like
No,
encouraging. Yeah.
no, that was not how. That's not how I recall it. And there was no expectation that there would be something in the house. It was simply that I was sitting there and literally felt someone putting their hand on my head,
Wow. That
and there was no one there.
I just got complete chills thinking
Yeah.
about that, like how profound that is of what the implications are of what that means. Like energy just in a room that
Yes.
feels like a consciousness that, isn't just a breeze or a leaf or you know what I mean? That it to me, that's the biggest question that I'm struggling with here is because it has so many implications, uh, in death and all sorts of things of, if there can be a spirit and what does that mean? And I wouldn't necessarily identify that as a spirit, but I do think it's a presence of some kind. And and
Yes.
I'm working on that to try and explore that a little bit more. So, one of the questions I was going to ask you as well, and I think you answered it in the beginning, but but maybe there's more to it. And that is that, like, prior to that experience, have you ever had an experience like that before?
Um, uh, you know, uh, actually, I was thinking about this. It wasn't before, but after visiting your home and having that experience in your home. My partner and I were in. I hope this is okay to talk about this. I'm just going to
Oh,
share it with you
yeah. I
and,
mean, and we can always
make
edit
of
it
it.
out. I
Yes.
appreciate
Um,
your being so candid, actually.
yeah, this was something that I will I will share that my partner and I have been really focused on finding a home in France, and we have since done that in Bordeaux. But a couple of years ago, we were traveling around France, considering where we might want to find a place. And so one of the places we visited was Avignon, which is in the south. It's in Provence. And in Avignon, on the river, there is Pont d'Avignon, which is a bridge. You can Google it and see for yourself. It is a bridge that does not connect to the other side. It's a bridge that was blown up at some point or was destroyed at some point during some war. It's been there since the 1100s. And we were on that bridge. And I had been having these experiences most of the day where I was feeling especially euphoric and like connected and feeling at the same time grounded and really eyes wide open to the experiences we're having. And that's I'm sure a lot of people experience this in France. And I remember being on the bridge with Peter, with my partner, and then suddenly just having this feeling of like unity,
Mm.
like time collapsed. I realized, and this is what I experienced, that none of this means anything. That there was this moment of understanding that everything we experience in the tangible world is meaningless. That it has no value whatsoever. This is all beside the point, and that we are all connected, and that, you know, if there is post life, if there is life after death, that it's just on the other side of something that we're now experiencing.
Hmm.
It's not far away. It's
Yeah.
not, it's literally just on the other side of the veil. And this lasted for about half an hour. I was walking around in this state of, I
Wow.
probably look like a crazy person. I was walking around just like in this state of bliss. Um, and and I've carried that with me just for since that time. And it really did shift my thinking about, just kind of knocking around in the world and trying to survive, and
Right.
the struggles that we all face and the pain and suffering that we experience and that we witness in others. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's sounds very profound, and it sounds almost like some stories of enlightenment where,
yeah,
right, where that feeling of connectedness, like we're all drops of water in the ocean together. And when
yes,
you feel that love because
yes,
there's
yes.
no sense of separation in any way. Wow, that just got the chills again. You know, in some of the reading that I've done, and I've done a lot of reading just of even the books in this house, um, because there's so many books on, psychic phenomena, mediumship, so many books on transcendence and spirituality. Um, you know, and also there's a similar thing when people say they've had a UFO, that they're an experiencer. And there's this thing, and I was just reading about it yesterday, which is what they call the hitchhiker's effect, which is that
Mm.
once you have one experience, it's like your lens just kind of opens a little bit, and then you start having other experiences because something has been shifted in you, and also you're more open. The veil of judgment has also shifted, and yeah, that sounds amazing. That concept, that consciousness of life is just right there. It's not like up in heaven or down in hell, or over there in the sky. I love how you describe that it's just like right there. It's just got
It
like a
is right
little,
there.
yeah. And
And Micah, I really appreciate. I just have to share with you. I really appreciate you. Sometimes we need names for things, and describing it as what did you call it?
effect.
The hitchhiker's effect. That's, yes, you have an experience like this, and then your eyes are opened to it. You have a different lens through which you see the world, I think. And
Mhm.
certainly, as a therapist, I hope to help people do that. I hope to help people kind of shift the lens. Depression is all about it's like noticing how you're seeing the world and beginning to shift the way you see the world, and
Mhm.
maybe look at things in a more positive light, or at least a more neutral light than the negativity that we bring when we're experiencing depression, just as an example. But that's very helpful. Thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely. That story is so amazing in that, yeah, it sounds like that you're opening also, you're exploring the world, you're opening, you're changing your life. You and your partner are realizing life doesn't have to just be one way, you know?
Right.
You can live in different
Yes.
places, and then that you're open. And that's so interesting. So I'm reading this book, and two subjects that you brought up here I've been reading about in the last 3 days. One of them was the hitchhiker's effect. And
Hmm.
the other one was the concept of love, of like feeling that sense of exuberance and love, and that, everyone's day to day dilemmas when you're in that sea of consciousness, like the games we're playing every day, which I'm sure is like a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed, etc. But then when you can step back and just sort of like sit in that water, I always think of it as like water because I love
Yes.
water so much. But like if you can sit and just be surrounded by that water of connectedness, all of that
Yes.
does kind of fall away if saying allow it to puts a little bit of a burden on the person. But yeah, if you can find your way to that.
Point that out. That sorry to interrupt you.
No, I mean,
Uh,
I'm actually really loving this conversation.
Me too. The idea that yes, that the burden is on the person in allowing it, and
Yeah.
it's we find our way, and there are lots of reasons why we don't find our way, and
Uh-huh.
some of them have nothing to do with our own personal capacity, right? They can just simply be the struggles that people find themselves in. That it's harder to
Right.
find their way to these things, and I understand that, and I'm also very aware that it's a fanciful story to talk about being on a bridge in France, and having this epiphany moment, and not everyone gets these experiences, and I'm well aware of that, and I feel very lucky, and I have gratitude for that. So
Wow. Yeah. And all I could think of is that a bridge to nowhere is such a symbol, right? Um, wow.
it's
Got it.
do you know? Can I tell you something, Mike? I never even occurred to me until you said that I'm on this bridge to know. Literally, you can Google it right now and you'll see there's a bridge and it stops in the middle of the water. And it never occurred to me that I was on a bridge to nowhere talking to the afterlife. It's just so,
Wow. I mean, I
yeah.
just kept,
Thank you for
wow.
that.
I mean, life brings you symbols. Oh, the other thing in this book that I was reading was, you said that you felt when someone touched you on the head
Yep.
that that you felt that they trusted that you would be the right narrator. And that's a very interesting thing to perceive. I've felt something similar being here. I feel like I'm supposed to sort of like pick up this ball and play with it and have this land and not only be its guardian, but move it forward somehow. And,
Hmm.
it's an abstract concept, but I sort of feel like I walked into this responsibility also of narrating. And I was reading a book on, I don't know if I want to mention what it is because it'll take us in a different direction, but where somebody else also felt like they were supposed to be the narrator. They were supposed to be trusted to tell a story, and then they felt like they were given the responsibility to do that, and you just kind of have to go with it. Those are one of the times in life where you just like lean in, lean into that curve like when you're riding a motorcycle. So
Absolutely. No, and can I just say I give you compliments just for a moment and say that one of the things that I love about you and about this and what you're doing is you are open and curious about the world. You are always curious about the world. You are engaged in the world in a way that I think a lot of people I think seeing this podcast or hearing this podcast that people will be able to be inspired by. You're inspiring in that way, and I just want to share that. And then that is heartfelt. I've always felt that about you in all the years that I've known you, and yeah, it's very inspiring.
I'm so moved that you said that. Thank you, Ray. That's so kind. It's so kind. Yeah, I feel like I'm walking into a maze or walking out onto a bridge to nowhere and doing this because I know a lot of people are like, uh-huh, you know, and it's sort of like coming out of the closet in a different way where it's like, this is who I am. You don't have to take it or leave it, but this is just another voice in, the sea. And so, but it has been like an amazing experience of like meeting people, talking to people. By the way, you and I have never had a conversation like this because we have rarely been alone. And might I say, let's have dinner together, just
I would
you and
love
I.
that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Or yeah, I
I
mean,
would love
I
that.
feel like that would be amazing because I don't feel like we've ever had that opportunity to go a little deeper because, we're often in a pretty social situation.
Yes, I would
Yes.
agree with that. And
Yeah.
context matter. Isn't it interesting that we get in this situation and we discover that we have things to talk about outside of the social context that we're normally in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm there.
I've
Sounds
always
lovely.
guessed that about you, to be honest. I always knew that you and I have an unsaid knowing. I feel like we like each other a lot, but we've always
Yes,
been in this whirlwind of people. And so we've never really had the chance to connect so much one on one. And so I so appreciate this. Whether it's in
but we
Bordeaux
will.
or I'll meet you on a bridge.
You're welcome anytime to Bordeaux or Pont d'Avignon, wherever you
Thank
want.
you. Thank you. Yeah, I would love that. So, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation that you feel is important?
Can I just say one thing? And I am going to make a comment about the work I do, which is as a therapist. People come into my office oftentimes looking for, they want to do psilocybin, they want to do psychedelics towards some sort of epiphanous experience, to kind of
Mhm.
transcend the pain and suffering from their lives. And I do believe that those things are possible. But I also understand that a lot of times we have to be in our bodies and in the world we're in, and sometimes those things come to us not through seeking them directly, by way of staying grounded and acknowledging. I'm going to contradict myself right now and say, world, if it's true that this world means nothing, the paradox, of course, is that we have to accept where we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
We have to. There is the paradox of healing, which is that you are able to accept where you are in order to change, in order to experience the new. So there is value in staying grounded in your body and accepting the world that we're experiencing. I hope that doesn't sound too crazy, but
No, actually, I think that's very interesting because, a lot of people are seeking not only mental health, but like a spiritual connection that makes sense
yes,
of everything. And I think that's why these two go together is that there's a meaningfulness to life and to partnerships and friendships. And I think in a way, just because we all went through COVID together, that was a
yes,
time where everyone just had to accept what was going on. And even if people were losing what they had, there was nothing you could really do about anything unless it was like apply for assistance or
right,
get help from friends. I
yes,
know in the beginning of COVID, before I sold the substation, I had just decided to put that building up for sale and then the shit hit the fan and I knew that that building would not sell and I had to come up with this crazy mortgage every month. And
I remember
I was
this.
just like, I was driving Lyft, I was eating canned food. And, to think that that was 5 years ago and now I'm living in this beautiful home. And that was not everyone's story. And so I do feel guilt in a way for having had a lucky outcome. But, I do think that something about COVID taught me to just be like, okay, so this is what it is. And we learned how to just accept it.
What you just said, I think, and I remember you sharing with me about the struggles of, coming up with the mortgage every month and eating canned food and driving for Uber. That what you just said is what I think to be true, which is this radical acceptance of the reality we're in order to experience transformation. You
Mhm,
can't skip over. We have to radically accept where we are, and then through that acceptance, whether it's emotion, whether it's the conflict we're in, whether it's just
mhm.
the life circumstances, and in doing that we're able to transform. But you got to accept where you are first, and that's where most people, many people, they get stuck. They don't want. I understand it's difficult and it's
Yeah,
painful to accept where we are. So
yeah, yeah. What an
how
interesting
about you?
conversation.
Really fun. Really
Yeah,
fun, Micah.
yeah. Totally
Thank you
agreed.
so much.
Oh my God, thank you. Thank you for being so open and candid. I think your story is so interesting on its own and in the context of this house. And as you see how this story kind of builds out, it's getting, oh my God, this is like a whole nother conversation about where this seems to be going, because this is a story I cannot control. This is not like a
Right.
written play. This is a story where I have to be open to whatever happens, to
I
whatever I
understand.
find out, or also to how much I reveal, because I'm dealing with the legacy of a person. Maybe it's something else here. So it's taking some interesting left turns. So
I'm excited to see where it goes.
thank you. Wasn't that interview interesting? My first thought is that the activity seems to want a witness. And while I spend a lot of time here alone, it's when I have guests or somebody just even stopping by that there's an increase in activity. And something else that strikes me as interesting is that when I began discussing the paranormal activity with others and interviewing friends about their experiences here, the energy seemed to become elevated. A friend was here 2 weeks ago, and I was about to turn on 2 new sets of lights outside because we wanted to sit outdoors and enjoy the stars. And one of the lights is really awkward to turn on. I have to actually put my hand under a big piece of wood to get it to go on. And the other one has a remote that I hadn't touched. It was on the other end of my bedroom. Long story short, we went outside and both lights were already on, as if welcoming us. And I was talking about, I got to turn the lights on outside, and they were on. And that just really surprised me. And it seems like this is happening a lot more lately. I know that this next passage is a bit dense, but it's interesting. So I figured, why not? Avery Gordon is a woman, and she wrote the book Ghostly Matters, Haunting in the Sociological Imagination. She wrote, to be haunted and to write from that location, to take on the condition of what you study, is not a methodology or a consciousness you can simply adopt as a set of rules or an identity. It produces its own insights and blindnesses. Following the ghosts is about making a contact that changes you and refashions the social relations in which you are located. To me, it makes a lot of sense because I feel that being here has changed me. The energy appears to heighten when the activity itself becomes the subject of the conversation. The lights turning on when my friend and I went outside didn't happen on any ordinary evening. It happened in the context of exploring and naming the phenomenon. Ray's interview may have created the same effect because I don't really talk to myself when I'm home alone. I mean, I do a little bit, but we all do that. But I certainly don't talk about this. This suggests that whatever is present in the house may not simply be reactive to company or guests. It may be reactive to intentional focus and acknowledgement. In other words, the act of naming the activity, that's a tough sentence to say, could be part of what animates it. This is kind of profound and is something I need to explore more. Also, I wanted to mention the fact that I'm using an oracle deck to calm down and to navigate my own uncertainty is in retrospect kind of profound because I inherited that deck from George. And that's where the line between investigator and investigatee becomes somewhat blurred. I don't know if I'm experiencing someone who's no longer here. I don't know how else to say that. Avery Gordon's quote about being changed by following the ghost kind of applies not just philosophically, but literally to what's unfolding in my relationship with the space and maybe the man. The snake card holds a threshold symbol, and that's not just a coincidence. It's a striking coincidence. Yes, I use that word striking on purpose. The snake as an archetype carries enormous symbolic weight that may be worth unpacking. across virtually every ancient tradition, from the Egyptians to Greek mythology to the Kundalini serpent of Hindu cosmology to the biblical garden. Oh, wow. The snake was in front of my greenhouse. The snake is a symbol of transformation, death, and rebirth, and hidden knowledge, and the crossing of thresholds. Given that George's entire obsession was with the boundary between life and death, and given that I'm living in the house of a man who died while actively probing those boundaries, the snake appearing 3 times in physical reality and then again in the oracle deck may be less of a random pattern and more of a psychic signature. The house or something in it may be communicating in the oldest symbolic language available. Isn't it strange that a person can be gone and yet still exude so much influence over a life? A presence I don't quite understand, and it's created a catalyst for self-reflection, creativity, and change. In approaching this 5th episode, more like a crime drama, I did want to mention that my last name happens to be Kopp. That's Micah Kopp, your creator and host of I'm Curious About George. Did you hear that sound? That's the sound of my clock telling me it's time to end episode 5. I did want to mention this weird fact, and that is that many buildings that seem to be haunted are churches and graveyards and old hotels and castles. And well, if you look at this place, oddly, it looks like a castle from outside. How weird. So there's one last thing that I wanted to say. And maybe the truth is, every house is a mind full of rooms, and every mind is a house full of rooms. We're all living in structures built by those before us, by their history, our history, and we're all leaving traces for those who come after. Okay, so here we go. Thank you. We'll see you on the next round.